Hi, friends. Welcome back, or welcome. Either way, I'm glad that you're here. So, you may notice that Crafted Courage is now its own channel, and that's thanks to you all. Because I felt that the experiment of my first episode was a success, I felt encouraged to make it its own voice. And I am so excited to bring this to the world and just see what happens. So, thank you for joining me on this journey, truly. And I'm glad you're here. You may be wondering if this is your first time, what in the world is Crafted Courage? Well, to me, Crafted Courage means taking the steps to expand your comfort zone through the means of creativity. Once we take our first steps to be brave, to choose courage, to expand our hearts, our minds, our skill sets, we carry that growth with us into other parts of our world. And so it may seem like just an hour a day. That's the goal with Crafted Courage, just that small adjustments, small parts of our routine end up creating big results underneath the surface, whether we realize it or not, that we're growing, that we're changing, and we need that medium of creativity to help us get there. So whether that's stopping unhelpful narratives that are in your head, or maybe embracing imperfection and letting that go, because we can't be perfect. We're human. Maybe it's just trying a new craft because, hey, you just want to try a new craft and you want to see somebody else do it for the first time. See how hard it is or easy or whatever. So why am I doing Crafted Courage? Well, part of that has to do with New Year's resolutions. I know maybe some people have their own feelings about New Year's resolutions, but for me, I chose a different approach this year. Instead of naming very specific goals that sometimes maybe were too high or too hard to meet, I chose words to embody and live through. For this year, it's authenticity and vulnerability. And you might argue that those are harder things than maybe some of the other goals that you might set for yourself. And I would agree. But you're like, what does that have to do with stained glass? And my answer to you would be transparency. In order to live authentically and vulnerably, we have to do that in a manner that's transparent. To be who we are, to stand in our truth and say, this is who I am and that's enough. That's hard, but it's doable and it's important that we do it because we are enough, just as you are. Second, when we allow light to shine through us, the color, the shape of our story, that impacts the world around us. And it's so powerful that when you are able to live authentically, able to live vulnerably, that you are sharing that unique perspective with the world, one that only you can share. Your voice is unique. And I hope that you feel confident enough to share that with the world, because I want to hear it. And I want mine to be heard too. So, that's my very high concept, poetic way of linking stained glass painting and creativity to just how I think I can grow in my own personal experience. So, I hope you'll join me in this craft. All right, so materials list. What you're going to need to get started are some picture frames. I use Dollar Tree picture frames, 5x7. I will speak to quality later. But one thing I would recommend is maybe buying one or two, depending on your scale of the project. But if you're only doing one, maybe buy an extra just in case. I also got the Plaid Gallery Glass paints. I don't know if there's a competitor to this product, but if there is, I'm not sure, but give it a try. That's the one I used. I would recommend keeping some paper towels handy. I don't know if you work really clean. But if you do, tell me how, because I do not. So recommend paper towels. I also used a needle tool, which I had left over from the quilling experiment, but you could easily use a toothpick. I just think it kind of helps to pop bubbles, to move things around, because there are a lot of bubbles, just kind of help you along that process. I used a hot glue gun as well to secure the glass in the frame once the project was done and everything was dry. You probably could use super glue as well, but if you have hot glue gun lying around, then this is a great use for it, but you'll need some sort of adhesive, so keep that in mind when you're considering what all you need to purchase. All right, well, now you got your materials. Let's get to work. So, prep work. First, I want to introduce you to the artist in residence. And by that, I mean he is an artist and he lives with me. This is Mandraws. He has been a professional artist for many moons now, drawing since childhood, working professionally for over a decade. Oof, he's old. And he is cutie patootie extraordinaire in my life, and I'm happy to call him my husband. And now that we've gotten the sappy things out of the way, I just wanted to embarrass him. He loves me. Luckily, Matt offered his help and expertise on this project with me. He was able to draw some patterns for me. So when I started looking at, stained glass painting, really stained glass itself, patterns are very common with stained glass. And so I knew right out of the gate that that was something I would utilize in this project, so that I had a guide, I had a template, and I wanted some very specific things. And luckily, having an artist in residence helps with that. So Matt drew up some patterns for me, drew the star, a moon, a sun, a mushroom, and a eye. I kept wanting to call it eyeball, but it's an eye. Anyway, this really gives you a sense of my personal aesthetic. I love celestial things. I love the moody, groovy 70s. So here we are. This is exactly me in some stained glass templates. So I was very thankful for his help. And if you want to support him and his art, check out Mandraws on Instagram. And he also has a YouTube channel, The Moonlight Artcade. So check it out if you're interested in gaming and art and how those two worlds meet. Anywho, he also drew me a coloring sheet. So that was really helpful. I mean, I don't know what to call it, swatch, something like that, where I was able to test out my color choices beforehand. Honestly, I don't paint. This is the closest I've ever gotten to it, really. So to have that sense of color and give myself the opportunity to plan it out a little bit before I sat down in front of my template really made me feel a lot more comfortable approaching the projects. With the help of the artist in residence and my preparation of the color swatch, color test sheet, that led me to the final challenge of the prep work, the outlines. Dun dun dun! This simulated letting was quite the challenge. You have to squeeze that bottle steadily on top of moving your hand at a consistent pace, so that is like really difficult, especially if it's something that you're not used to, like using your hand in that way and also trying to be graceful in your slow but steady movement. It's really hard to make a straight line. I mean, well, nobody can, I guess, but certainly applying pressure and trying to do that at the same time makes it even more difficult. So they'll never really truly be straight. I think even with a guide, you just have to let loose and just go with it. I try to be mindful of my movements, and so in that way, I found this to be relaxing. When you get an outline, it feels very satisfying because of all the micro movements and pressures that you're applying to make it happen. So when you see that shape come to life and you feel like it was very smooth, in some instances you get a real nice smooth line and it's like, wow, like that feels extremely satisfying. That's what's fun about this. The star was the hardest in my opinion. What I noticed with like V shapes and circles is that you have to be really careful. And maybe that's not something you're very mindful of if you're doing this for the first time. I know I certainly wasn't, Because what I ended up doing is if I treated it like writing, which is what comes natural to me, I found that a couple of times I got in my own way of the lead trail. So like I would end up pushing that tip back through the lead line as I completed my circle or completed the V shape. With all of my projects, I try to keep an hour time limit. I want this Crafted Courage in general to be something that's approachable. It's a little bit of time each night or a little bit of time that you can give it. And that's the goal of this, is to make creativity a habit, not something that's a chore or something that you have to devote significant amounts of time to on your weekends or whenever you have free time. It's like, no, if you find an hour a day, you can do this. This took a little longer than that. I made 5 outlines though in the time. I think that was about an hour and a half. So I think this is relatively quick considering how much got done in that hour and a half. And I felt like there was a lot of paint left for the lead lines. So it was, with this size of a 5x7 frame, I think this was an appropriately sized project for the amount of time that I wanted to give it. First, I'm gonna say that I didn't catch that autofocus was on until a good way into my sun, so just bear with me until I get that fixed. And while we're getting things out of the way, I totally overestimated how easy this would be. In my head, I just needed to pour in some color and that was the end. How hard could that be? Well, I'm glad you asked, because the $1 million answer is harder than you think. Since I had already worked on my color palettes going into it, I knew exactly what I needed to do, which helped me feel a lot more comfortable with the process. And I would say that was a valuable step that I'm glad I took. My goal with these crafts is generally to take 1 hour, but since I was overestimating the scale of this project, I did end up overshooting the hour too. I didn't mind though, because I really enjoyed the painting process once I got the hang of it. But in this session, things that could go wrong did go wrong. I had trouble with getting the paint to come out of the bottle. I'm looking at you, Amber Yellow, you know who you are. I had paint going over the lines. I tried to wipe it away and made a bigger mess, and then I accidentally dropped the paper towel roll on the sun piece. Whew, what a first attempt at this. So I just had to breathe and remind myself that this is a new challenge for me. And painting in particular is something I have very little experience with. So working neatly or understanding the medium will not come naturally to me. I definitely had to be gentle with myself when I was getting frustrated with what I felt were mistakes. When I let go and just focused on the moment I was in, I found myself really enjoying the fluidity of the paint. You just fill the space and let it flow, and it's really satisfying. I think we can all agree that when we let go of control and bring awareness to the present, we are allowing ourselves the freedom of play and fun. And after all, that's really what this is about. When we make curiosity and joy the focal point of our experience, then it doesn't matter how good something is. It only matters that we chose to follow our sense of adventure and learn something new about ourselves in the process. So you may be wondering, Libs, why are you here? I wanted to let you know that in the next discussion, I do touch on the subject matter of grief. And maybe you're in a place right now where that's not something you want to hear. And I totally understand and respect that decision. So if you would like to skip this part, please use the chapter markers below and move straight on to the I. Happy, groovy conversation there. Or if you'd like to join me, feel free to stick around. No matter where you are, that's where I'll meet you. The mushroom is a really special piece for me personally. My mom would often doodle mushrooms on the back of bills while she was hanging on the phone with somebody for endless amounts of time, or just doodling it on calendars or any little piece of paper nearby. It was just something that she would doodle. And so my mom passed away about 3 years ago now. And February is a particularly difficult month for me. And so when I had Crafted Courage in mind to create this episode, I had a very set goal of when I wanted to release it and how I wanted to do that. That didn't quite happen because grief kind of made a home. You can't control grief. It's the smallest of things that usually brings grief up. And that's when it becomes the most difficult to move through. And it's challenging because grief is an emotion that you can't really predict when it's going to happen, and you don't know how long it's going to stay. I feel like now I'm in a place where I am truly processing my grief. And that meant giving myself patience, giving myself kindness to move through my day, week, month, however I needed to. That was a new experience for me. I had never given myself that kind of grace before. And so this month I did. And so I didn't push myself to get this done on a specific time frame. I allowed myself to feel what I was feeling. Grief is very hard because it is an emotion that you probably want to brace yourself from. You want to run away from because you just know it's going to be hard. There's no way around it. One of the quotes that I really think represents grief, and I wish I could give attribution to who this belongs to, but is that grief is love with a heavy coat. Because grief exists where love once lived. And that is a very hard reminder of maybe the loss of that love. So we each have our own dance with grief. Maybe that's the loss of a significant person in your life. Maybe it's a dream you had that didn't turn out as you hoped. Maybe it's a connection to someone else that wasn't truly the right fit. No matter the source, grief is a heavy weight. And where love once lived, now grief appears. Give yourself the time to feel what you feel. But maybe this time you do it with a pen in your hand or a paintbrush or some old magazines and you make something from it. Maybe you take some stained glass paint and allow light to shine through it. The best way we can honor ourselves in times of emotional distress is to acknowledge what we're feeling and why we're feeling it. Where words fail us, creativity provides a safe outlet of expression. Art truly has a way of capturing the emotion in color, in light, or maybe in the lack thereof. And it is important that we see creativity in art not just as a means to make beautiful things, but to connect our human experience to imagery in a way that needs no words to feel. So I hope that in times of discomfort, in times of heavy, hard feelings that are difficult to carry, that you choose creativity. You can rewrite your story with beauty, with healing, with purpose. It is your story, and you choose how it's written. The eye, ooh. Well, maybe less spooky and a lot more groovy, am I right? This one I had a lot of fun with, and it had happened a little bit by accident, if we're being honest. I think what happened here was, you come in with the best intentions, right? Like I had my little color swatch plan that I had already sketched out the colors and done the homework. But creativity often says, nah, we're gonna do something different. So I accidentally switched up some colors from my plan, and that's when curiosity took over and said, hey, what if we mix some colors? And I had so much fun following that what if. And so I didn't know how the paints would react, honestly. On the bottle it says, do not shake, these colors. So I was like, well, I don't know, how sensitive are these things? It was a lot of fun to just say, you know what, I'm gonna try it anyway. And so I dropped in some color, some spots I swirled it, some spots I made lines and then drug the needle tool through it. Other spots I made some circles or some little blobs and little shapes. And it was really freeing to let go of that expectation that I had set for myself or that plan. I just did what I thought would be fun. When we choose to follow curiosity, we invite wonder, whimsy, playfulness to the party, and we let go of expectation. There's no way that we can control the outcome of anything when we really think about it. And all we can do is act in the present moment. And so when we allow ourselves to be in that moment, to act from a place of mindfulness and presence, we are embodying joy and just seeing where it takes us. All right, so final thoughts. This was an interesting craft. I think by the tone of my voice, you're gonna say, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. I didn't necessarily love this project. Ultimately, I just wanted to do stained glass, and this is not stained glass. It's very different, and it achieves a different result. So in that way, I was kind of disappointed by the end of it. Couple things to consider. One, you're never going to get straight lines. You are a human. You cannot do that. It's just part of our human nature, where it's already going to be different visually than what you might expect. It's a different look. And so that already kind of took me out of it. One of the challenges, though, it is kind of a stinky process. So if you're sensitive to smells, the colored paints in particular, I guess because of how they dry, there's probably a lot of chemicals in there because they dry transparently, but you see how opaque they are when you put them down. It's a stinky process. So if there's something that you need to consider there for sensitivity purposes, then maybe be mindful of that. Also, there were a lot of bubbles, which I found myself really just, kind of poking them. They do show through in the final project. So if you're wanting a very consistent look and you want it to be completely clear and transparent and not have those bubbles, then that is something that you need to do. Maybe it's part of your look, or maybe you build it in, there's reasons why you would want that there. Maybe you're doing an underwater scene and that's cool. Maybe that's why it's there. But if that's not a look you're trying to achieve, then I found that to be a little, tedious to try to poke bubbles, so that they wouldn't be present in the final product. Another issue that I experienced in the process is that when I laid down those lead lines, initially, now not a perfect straight line, right? But I thought they were pretty smooth. But when it dried, like the eye in particular, you can see where I had this round shape around the eye, the iris. But when I filled the space with paint and it dried, it's now wavy around the eye. And so that was kind of disappointing. That once I felt like I had a good outline. I was really happy with it, but even the final product was somehow changed by the color application, and maybe I was putting too much. Truly, I don't know. Like I said, I'm a beginner. I went into this with zero knowledge, just jumped in. So it was a little bit of a downer when I saw, oh, this shape isn't what I expected it to be. And maybe putting too much color in that space in the open, where you drop the colored paint in, maybe something during the drying process pulls that lead line down, and that's what creates that wavy effect. I could have put too much paint. I don't know. So maybe if you all experiment with that, let me know. Maybe you're like, hey, you just put way too much paint, and that would make sense. So that's another part of this project that I just didn't necessarily love. So for what I spent on this project, I think probably around $30-ish. I didn't necessarily love it. And what this said to me is that if I don't enjoy the experience, then the dollar value of something is going to impact my final opinion of it. So $30, I mean, it's not too expensive, but it's not. It certainly could be cheaper, and there are other cheaper crafts out there if that's something to be considered for your wallet. I just think that, I wasn't really happy with the final piece, and so in that way I was like, that feels a little too expensive for me. All in all, though, I hope that you'll find this experience to be something that, whether or not it's for you, it sparked something in you creatively. Maybe you see this and think of another project that you're like, was thinking about doing that. Maybe now I will. So whether or not it's for you, I hope you've enjoyed this time together. I know I certainly have, and I would love it if you'd leave me a comment. Tell me about your experience, or, like, subscribe, support the channel if you found this to be something that you'd like to continue seeing more of. I guess I'd love to have you back. So in the meantime, I am going to say goodbye, dear friends and brave explorers. And I will leave you with this poetic ponderance that I've come up with, and I hope that it'll speak to you. But in the meantime, I hope that you'll be a light. I hope that you'll take care of yourself. And when curiosity comes knocking, I hope you'll open the door. Until next time. Stained glass. To be fragile is to be human. It is an act of vulnerability to allow the delicate truth of ourselves to be held by other hands. It is not a weakness to be so tender. It is a strength to acknowledge this gentle nature of being and still face the day with a full, kind heart. Fear would have you lock yourself away under the guise of protection. Authenticity would ask you to bravely stand in the sun. There is so much beauty contained within the frame of your experience. An intricate story woven together in a tapestry of pigmented glass. The unique blend of color and design is one that can only be shared by you. Dust off any remnants of doubt and allow light to shine through you just as you are. Let the world behold your dazzling hues, and it will be all the better for it.